Execution in Huntsville. We're live as a Central Texas killer is put to death. And a day of deliberations in the Sean Oakman trial. We have the latest as the jury decides the fate of the former Baylor football player accused of rape.
And we will slowly warm up as we head into the weekend, especially by Saturday. But Sunday, another surge of cold air will be coming in. And this is just the beginning. It will continue to get colder into early next week. Your Central Texas News Now starts right now.
From the heart of Texas, this is Central Texas News Now.
A Texas death row inmate, once described by a prosecutor as having a heart full of scorpions, faces execution for killing his estranged wife's parents and her brother, who was a Waco police officer. Thanks for joining us at 6 o'clock. I'm Lindsay Lippman. Joe Gum is on assignment. Billie Wayne Coble is scheduled to receive lethal injection in Huntsville any minute now after the U.S. Supreme Court refused a last-day appeal from him. He was condemned for the August 1989 shooting deaths of Robert, Zelda, and Bobby Vicka, his father-in-law, mother-in-law, and brother-in-law at their homes in Axtell. His attorneys asked the U.S. Supreme Court to delay the execution, arguing Coble's original trial lawyers were negligent for conceding his guilt, but that delay was denied. Dennis Turner joins us now live from outside the Walls unit in Huntsville, and inside Coble will be executed. Dennis, what's going on out there right now?
It's a pretty subdued, almost a business as usual atmosphere in Huntsville tonight, Lindsay. A handful of protesters finally showed up just about a half hour ago, but for the most part, the streets around the prison right here in the heart of Huntsville stayed pretty empty. Shortly after 5 o'clock, family members made their way into the prison to witness the execution. They filed past prison employees at attention, offering them a salute. Coble is the oldest person Texas has ever put to death since the modern return of the death penalty in the 1970s. The Texas Department of Corrections brought Coble here to Huntsville to prepare him for his final moments. Let's come back out here live right now. The witnesses to the execution are getting ready to file right past me. Here they are right here. These are the folks that will be witnessing the execution tonight, making their way over to the prison building, including our own Holly Stouffer. We'll hear from her later on. Let's go back to the tape now. We're told that Mr. Coble was allowed visits with relatives and clergy in preparation for the execution. Late today, the Supreme Court declined to get involved in Coble's appeal for a stay, as you said, Lindsay, and the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole also denied his request. The only thing that could save Coble now is a last-minute call from Governor Abbott, something prison officials call very unlikely, though they do say the last time it did happen was almost 12 years ago today. We're standing by here for the latest word on the latest developments. And as we said, our own Holly Stouffer just walked across to witness the execution. We'll get back to you as soon as we can with any late-breaking developments. For now, we are live in Huntsville. Dennis Turner, Central Texas News Now. Lindsay, back to you.
As Dennis mentioned, the Texas Tribune reports Coble will become the oldest man executed in Texas during the modern era of the death penalty, which started in the 1970s. Prison data shows he's just part of an aging death row population and one of nearly 30 inmates who've lived on Texas's death row for more than 25 years. Coble will also be the third death row inmate to be put to death this year in the U.S. and the second in Texas, which is the nation's busiest capital punishment state. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, the other two people executed in 2019 were Robert Jennings on January 30th in Texas and Dominique Hakeem Marcel Ray on February 7th in Alabama. Two others had their executions rescheduled. One was reprieved and rescheduled, and another was stayed, meaning it was temporarily suspended. There were originally 23 more executions set to take place this year, including just 5 here in the Lone Star State. Ohio actually had more originally scheduled with 12. But of those 23 initially set after tonight, 4 executions have been rescheduled, 2 have been stayed, 1 date was removed, and another inmate died in March of last year. That leaves 15 execution dates left in 2019, including all 5 originally scheduled to take place in Huntsville. And as we said before, the state of Texas has now become the nation's busiest when it comes to executions. Just take a look at last year, for example. In 2018, Texas had the most executions by state by far, with more than half, 13 out of the 25 executions completed. Well, the second closest state was Tennessee with 3. Alabama, Georgia, and Florida had 2 executions last year. And Ohio, Nebraska, and South Dakota each had 1 execution in 2018. Back here in Central Texas, this is a closer look at inmates currently on death row and related to our region. Carnell Peaton Jr. is on death row for capital murder of his estranged wife in McLennan County in 2012. Ricky Cummings finds himself on death row after a shooting in 2011 in McLennan County that left 2 people dead. Richard Tabler has been sentenced to death for shooting and killing a man in Bell County in 2004. And Ramiro Ibarra is on death row for the sexual assault and murder of a 16-year-old girl in McLennan County back in 1987. We will have continuing coverage on Coble's execution. Make sure to stick with us for another live report from Huntsville throughout the hour. Billie Wayne Coble has become the 3rd inmate put to death this year in the U.S. and the 2nd in Texas, the nation's busiest capital punishment state. We now join Dennis Turner, who is live there in Huntsville for the update. Dennis.
Billie Wayne Coble, the oldest death row inmate in Texas, has been put to death here in Huntsville tonight, but not without a lot of drama. Shortly after the execution began, Coble's family caused a scene and was led from the building in handcuffs. Nellie Coble talked about the fact that they had put her son on a gurney, put a hoodie over his head, was getting ready to inject the lethal injection, and apparently the family just lost it. She, her husband, and her son all led away from the prison in handcuffs and put into Huntsville Police Department vehicles and taken away from the scene. We understand the execution did go ahead. The deed is done right now. We are waiting for Jeremy Diesel from the Department of Corrections to come out and give us a briefing on what happened in the building tonight. But needless to say, quite a bit of drama here in Huntsville at the last minute in the execution of Billie Coble. We'll get back to you with more on that as soon as we know more. We have pictures on our digital site coming up very soon of what we saw coming out of the building, and we will bring you the full press conference and more coming up as soon as we can get it to you. For now, live in Huntsville, Dennis Turner, Central Texas News Now. Lindsay, back to you.
Dennis, thank you for that breaking news update. We want to go back out live to Huntsville, where Jeremy Diesel, the public relations spokesperson for TDCJ, is now giving a news conference on the execution of Billie Wayne Coble. Let's listen in.
In that room were the offender witnesses, in addition to 3 press witnesses and 2 officers of the Inspector General's Office, which is an independent law enforcement organization tasked with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. There was a disturbance. Gordon Coble created some issues, started banging on the glass, and had to be removed from the witness chamber by those 2 officers. As a part of that scuffle, Dalton Coble and Nellie Coble were also removed from the witness chamber. I can share with you that both Gordon and Dalton Coble are currently in custody at the Walker County Jail and will be charged with resisting arrest and potentially other charges.
How common is that?
It's very rare.
What did they say? What was the disturbance? I mean, you mentioned the banging on the glass, but did Gordon or Dalton say anything?
Nothing that I heard that was able to be understood. There was just simply banging on the barred glass, and they were removed from the room. Some exclamations of no and some expletives, and they were taken into custody actually in the courtyard area outside of the death chamber itself.
The families are counseled on what goes on in the death room, are they not? I mean, so this should have been no surprise to them, correct?
Correct.
So is this at all shocking or surprising to you that this would happen?
It's certainly an unusual, it is certainly unusual. I can tell you that there was nothing that appeared overly different in Mr. Coble than other typically anxious offender witnesses who do appear ahead of time. We were aware to be diligent about him, but he was being observed like everyone is, and there was nothing that appeared to be enough to keep him out of the room beforehand.
So no warning signs. It just all of a sudden erupted without warning.
Nothing untoward. Yeah. Nothing untoward beforehand.
Presumably, the offender's family often show their grief in different ways. Was this an unusual expression of grief?
Yes.
What made it cross a line to the point where you had to charge them?
Well, actual physical activity, having to be removed from the witness room, is an unusual but not completely uncommon occurrence. It's certainly something that has happened before. It's difficult to tell, and it's all under investigation by the independent Office of Inspector General, exactly what the details of the event will end up being. But I can confirm that both of those gentlemen are in custody and charged with resisting arrest.
Do you know at what point in the execution they were led away from the witness room?
From my perspective, and again, I'm in the room next door, so I'm kind of insulated from what I can hear going on next door, but it appeared to me to begin during the final statement of the offender, toward the tail end of what is a fairly brief final statement, and that's when the son, Gordon Coble, kind of approached the glass, put his hands on the bars of the glass, and then eventually ended up hitting the glass with two arms and was taken from behind, removed from the room by the two Office of Inspector General officers who were also in the room.
So is it your understanding that they didn't actually watch the execution take place to its final?
It's difficult to tell at that point of the process with clarity what exactly is going on. I can tell you that from my perspective, the disturbance began before that process had actually gone too far into the process. Anybody else?
Do you think that Billie Coble knew what was going on in the witness room?
I would have no idea.
That glass isn't two-way glass.
It is.
So Billie Coble would have been able to see the witness room?
I suppose that's, well, yes, you can see into the witness rooms. He clearly was communicating through the glass during his final statement with witnesses who were in that room. He directly addresses at least two of them in his final statement. So, you know, it's pretty clear that he could have seen into that room. Now, what he was or was not able to see and at what point in the process it was, whether there would be any actual ability to see anything at that point, I couldn't begin to tell you.
Kind of going to the last day for him today, what was his routine and kind of the last meal that he had before the execution?
Mr. Coble was served the same meal that all offenders are. That was for both lunch and dinner. It's a range of menu options. He's provided with all of them. He would have been provided that about 4 o'clock this afternoon. He had the ability and did make some phone calls in that time period before the execution began. But again, his final appeal to the Supreme Court was denied at about 4:30 this afternoon. So it was fairly clear without action from the governor that this was going to take place.
What happens now with Coble's body?
It's taken to a funeral home, local funeral home, as are all executed offenders. And as part of the process, his son is in the paperwork, the person who's able to claim his remains.
When do you think that's likely to happen?
I do not know. Give me a second. I'll organize some things over here and come right back. Okay.
And you are listening live to a news conference out of Huntsville, and you could hear some of our reporters there asking questions of Jeremy Diesel, who is the communications director there at TDCJ. And if you're just joining us, there was a scuffle or a disturbance from some members of the Coble family. Let's go back out to Dennis Turner, who just grabbed his mic, and he's ready to kind of unpack the new information that we just got there from Jeremy Diesel, but he called it unusual when you asked him the question about does this happen often?
Absolutely, yeah. You don't expect this kind of thing to happen because, like I said, the families are counseled. They're almost schooled in the steps that are taken when this kind of a thing happens. So they know what's coming. They know what's going to happen. They know exactly the steps that are going to be taken right in front of them. So for something like this to happen, this is an absolute total outburst of just raw emotion and sadness and sorrow to lose this family member. Mr. Diesel is coming back now. I believe we're going to hear from some of the family members. We'll get back to you with that in just a moment.
All right, Dennis, thank you so much. And I think a lot of the people here in Central Texas where this crime took place, of course, want to know, did he apologize or show any remorse for his action, killing 3 people that day at their Axtell home, 3 members of the Vicka family, including a Waco police officer. Now, those family members have stepped to the podium, so let's listen into what they have to say.
Pray for peace for everyone affected today. While we grieve the amazing lives that were lost too soon, we find joy in the blessings and love we have in our family. It is well with our soul.
Thank you. There will likely be a couple other folks who will come chat with me.
As you can hear, members of the Vicka family, some of them we've interviewed right here on Central Texas, talking about the peace that they now feel from the closure of all of this. Certainly it does not bring their loved ones back, but their final words tonight were, "It is well. It is well with their soul." We will continue to track any new information coming out of Huntsville throughout the rest of this newscast, but for now we'll go to break.